So, Loida, all the things you experienced in your life, you experienced a lot of hardship, a lot of change, and um, but it taught you a lot of things, and you're incredibly successful. I would say
Oh,
I
thank
have
you.
five the permission to say that,
Yeah.
and you feel that way, and you have had careers. You were a woman in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is one of the biggest cities in the world, and doing business. And like, how did you? I know that you had a job where you worked in a corporate America as a young woman.
Right.
How did you survive? How did you do? How did you get there? How did you survive? Did you get any raises? How did you live?
Well, it was, it was really difficult. It was really difficult. And I have to say that out of, I mean, like I said, I'm a minority 3 times. And I think the hardest thing or the biggest challenges that I encountered in the business world was because I was a woman. Because my homosexuality, I could keep private, me being Latina, I don't know the extent of the discrimination that I faced.
You don't look Latina that much.
Right.
I think you have like a blondish hair.
And I think that's
you're lighter, maybe that you were able to, people were not able to like judge you straight in your face.
Yeah. So, and I think that's part of the reason why I didn't feel, I'm not saying I was never discriminated because I was a Latina, but I didn't feel it as much. It wasn't as pronounced as the discrimination that I received as a woman in the business world, in the professional world. And I started really, and one of the things that helped me become successful in my first career was the example that my parents put, to work hard. Now, they had no idea what the American dream was, but they certainly lived it, right? And because they didn't grow up in the U.S. and that just wasn't,
it wasn't in their head.
Right. It wasn't in their head.
Yeah.
They were just trying to do a good job.
Yeah.
And take care of their family and things like that. But my parents taught me really good work ethics. And so when I entered the workforce, when I first got my job, my attitude was, well, while I'm here, I'm just going to do a good job, right? I'm going to do a good job while I'm here. I'm talking about, when I clock in, I'm going to do a good job.
Right.
I'm done. I'm clocking out. I'm just trying to have fun, right? So,
and you can have fun too,
right? And
you know how to do
that.
Yeah.
And so, so I think my work ethics caught a lot of people's attention above me, and I quickly was promoted. I was quickly promoted in my first career. So I think I was 22 years old when I became an executive for a big high-end retail store. I won't say what it is because
It's okay.
22 though.
I was 22.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I was 22, and I was going to school. When I left my parents' house, I was working full time and going to school part time.
Yeah.
Eventually, I got into the field of loss prevention, and that's the career that was my career for the next. That's where I was moved up eventually to a senior executive, and I was the youngest, so I never. I was the youngest executive in the history of the company. That company had been founded like in 1890, 1886 or something like that.
That's
That's wild.
So it was definitely my attitude towards work. If I'm here, I'm going to do the best work that I can possibly do. And then what I found out by doing that is that I received I felt really good about myself. When at the end of my shift, I said, I did the best I could do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't to impress my bosses. It was to make me happy.
Yeah.
Right? Because I knew that I did the best that I could.
Yeah.
But, to get to that point, it was a struggle. It was a struggle because loss prevention in the 1990s was basically a man's world. And it might be an industry that's kind of going away just because of the brick and mortar stores are, and we're moving over to
digital.
Yeah. But in the 90s, I mean, it was rare for a company to have a female because we had to make arrests, right? We had to observe the shoplifters and then arrest them. And so who does that? Obviously a man.
Yeah.
Right? They're strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're powerful. And so I was as a woman, I was needed in the industry because certain department stores have female fitting rooms, right?
Yeah.
So only women can go in there.
Oh, yeah.
So really, we were given jobs because there was a need for somebody to complete the observation process inside of the fitting room, not because they believe that
you can do the job.
That we can do the job.
Yeah.
And, even though my father was not, the typical Mexican man, I still had that habit of, depending on men, to, move the car or take out the trash or, arrest the shoplifter, right?
Yeah.
So, and what ended up happening is a lot of men would take credit for
your job,
my work, right?
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. Like, I didn't see anything wrong with that, right? I just thought it was that's just the way things were. Until I realized that my yearly review was based on my arrest.
Oh.
And they started to see, why she only has like 3 arrests. What
right.
Yeah.
What she been doing?
Yeah. And so then I was like, wait a minute. You mean my yearly raises are based on my productivity?
Yeah.
And then I started, then it clicked.
Yeah.
And then I started to, fight for the space to make those cases for myself, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I started, getting credit for my work, but I was very young in the industry, so I wasn't that good.
Yeah.
I didn't become good until I was insulted by my male supervisor one day. And
wow. Yeah.
So, I was working for this company, no fitting rooms. It was a retail store, but the fitting rooms didn't exist there. So how I ended up there, I don't know.
You ended up there.
Right. So, but my boss would tell me, why don't you sweep the office or clean it, and I was like, well, why don't we clean it together? And he's like, because you're the woman.
That's all.
Yeah.
Out loud.
What's that?
He said it out loud.
Yeah, he would say it to me in my face, like he was just describing,
like a matter of fact thing.
Yeah, like
come on.
Yeah, you're the woman. You clean it, and I was like, what? You clean the office, Yeah. No, you better clean the office because you're a woman and that's what your job is, and you guys do that better than men, and I was like, I could catch shoplifters. He's like, you can catch 1 or 2, but that's really our job. So basically he told me that the men were there to, catch the shoplifters, and I was there because I was the cleaning lady. I was like, oh no, you didn't. Okay.
You didn't say that, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Fine.
Yeah.
That's what you think? I'm going to prove you wrong. And then I just dedicated all my time on developing really good observation skills and learning but analyzing what I was observing and trying it so that I can try to understand what it is about a person that that demonstrates that they have the intent to steal before they even commit the act, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have like 50 people in the store, right, and you're just randomly picking people to watch,
yeah,
or you're basing it on filters that you have. Oh, he has dirty shoes. Everybody with dirty shoes steals.
Yeah,
you're wasting your time, right? Every now and then you'll catch a person with dirty shoes that stole, but that doesn't make them a thief.
No.
And it's the same with race, right? Oh, there's the Latino, or there's the black person. They must be thieves, and everybody would focus on those things, right? And so I understood that wasn't,
that wasn't the case.
That wasn't the case. It wasn't, there was behaviors.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, there was behaviors that existed that would demonstrate or would eventually lead to at least the intent to steal. Right. You might not be successful to steal, but you have the intention.
Right.
And so I tried to start to understand what those behaviors were. And I think I did a pretty good job at gathering a cluster of behaviors, or understanding a cluster of or identifying a cluster of behaviors that most likely would lead to somebody attempting to steal, right? Whether they're successful or not attempting. And so then I was catching 10, 15 shoplifters every week. And this guy was catching 5. He couldn't get past 5, right?
Oh, shit. Those big numbers. Big numbers.
Those big numbers,
you got
poor people.
The guy like by the cuff just like, oh, what's up? I thought, like you said, I couldn't do this.
No, and so and also, because he treated me so poorly, I was like, okay, because one of the things about me is that if, and it's probably not appropriate, but I try to teach people lessons if I try to use
your actions.
Yeah, like I try to, if they behave a certain way, I treat them the same way so that they can learn what it feels like to be treated that way, right? So when he told me that I was basically there to clean, because that's what women were good for, every time I was ready to make an arrest, I would call him, be like, hey, you need to come over here and apprehend this person. I'm ready to, I have all the 5 elements because that's what you're good for.
Oh shit! I'm cursed. I'm sorry. That's what you're good for. Wow. Yeah. That's really. Yeah.
Yeah, and the best part is that every week we had a video conference call, and I know this is the '90s, so I'm gonna clue you guys in. It was an electronics store that sold computer components and things like that. So they were very advanced at that time, right? Okay. So we already had video conference calls. Oh. And during those video conference calls, every undercover agent had to announce how many cases they got for the week. And so
I got 15.
And so I was creeping up. I was like 2, and then 5, and then the next week 8, and the following week 10. And then before he knew it, I was always averaging between 10 to 15. And the highest this guy got was 8. So it was humiliating to him, right? Because everybody was like, wow, Loida, how did you do it? What are you doing, And shortly after that, but I hated, I couldn't stand, so I got that gratification, right? Like,
you're doing your job good. Yeah.
Yeah, like I became good because somebody told me that I wasn't good at that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I couldn't, even though things turned around for me, people appreciated my work, I didn't feel comfortable working with him, so I eventually went to another company, and that's where I was promoted to a senior executive. But even then, I realized that I always had to prove myself 3 times more than my male counterparts.
Yeah.
In order for me to receive the same credit, raise, promotion that my counterparts would. So it was, I did suffer a lot for, just because of the simple fact that I was a woman working in a man's world.
Yeah. You're catching all these people, you're betting really good, and now you're completely in a different field. Right.
So eventually, when I got promoted to senior executive, I was no longer catching shoplifters. I was doing internal investigations for fraud, and also, I would analyze the systems, the operations, the protocols, and try to identify any weak points so that we can, improve the policies, protocols to close that,
tighten everything up.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so again, I think I have a very strong analytical mind, because that's what helped me close these investigations.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I first got promoted, I was so underpaid that the state of California forced my employer to give me a raise, because I was paid below the rate of a salaried employee.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're paid less than that position.
Right.
Designated.
Right. So the state of California says a salaried employee needs to make between this amount and this amount.
So you were below.
I was below
the minimum.
Right.
Wow.
And I discovered that because my boss came to print out. He was in my office that day, and he printed out some documents on my off of my computer on my printer, and he left the pay rate scale for all the senior executives, and I was like, oh my God, I get paid like
way
least
below
than everybody else.
Yeah.
And of course, it was devastating, because I felt like I always had to work 3 times harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
Just to be acknowledged that I do a good job, and
it's disrespectful.
It is. It's disrespectful too. Yeah. So what I did was I said, okay, I'm fairly new in my position. I think I'd only been there for like a year and a half. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do the best job that I can possibly do, and I'm going to build my case for requesting a raise outside of my normal yearly raise.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So there was a couple of cases that I worked on that were there were some problems in the company with some high-end watches. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the company was having a huge shortage on these high-end watches. Mm-hmm. No one can figure out what was happening or why.
There was a shortage.
Yeah, throughout the entire company. I mean, every location, didn't matter the state, didn't matter,
Oh.
So, and everybody was looking at the wrong thing, right? Some executives were thinking it was shoplifters, but how is that possible if they're locked up, right? Mm-hmm. And only employees have keys. And so then most of the other executives thought it must be the employees, but how is that possible? What a huge coincidence that all the employees in every location are stealing, $150,000 to $800,000 worth of these watches, right? So I conducted, a deep investigation. I mean, I went beyond the obvious, which was employees and customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I started to look at the shipment. I thought, for sure, it's in the shipment. We're being short shipped, right? Mm-hmm. We're being told we're sending, and it wasn't there. Anyway, I created this system to try to identify where we were losing these watches, and it was watches and bands, just like the how what do you call that? The Apple watches sell the bands by themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
So these high-end watches would, they would sell you the whole watch, and we would also sell bands.
Bands, yeah.
Well, after combing through all the data information, all the videos, everything, analyzing our protocols, our systems, our shipment, all this stuff, tightening the ship, we still were losing these
the watches.
The watches. Yeah. So I was like, what is going on?
God, yeah.
It turned out to be the vendor. So the vendor, but not through shipment. The vendor would send their own employees to come and promote those watches. Mm-hmm. They were called trunk shows, right? They would come out, they would set up a table.
Like a little pop-up within the...
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they would bring their own merchandise. Now, their merchandise was not supposed to be mixed up with our merchandise, right? Mm-hmm. But these vendors where the employees didn't occur to them that,
the vendors would steal.
That the vendors would steal, and I had a counting system, right? So they would count all the watches and they would count all the bands. And so they would count 10 bands, 20 watches, everything's fine. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that the variance in price point of these watches were really wide. Some of them were $150 and there were some that were $5,000.
Oh, shoot.
So if they brought a $150,000 watch, pulled out a $5,000 watch from our vitrine, from our inventory to show it to a customer, the employee doesn't think there's anything wrong with that. But instead of putting that $5,000 watch back, they were putting their $150 watch back.
Oh, and that's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
So I figured it out, right? I figured out that this is what they were doing. So
it was on purpose.
This was on purpose, right? So within that same vendor, like this watch company, mm-hmm. the employees had figured out that they can do this. Yeah. And since every store had one of the watch vendors come out and promote the line, the product, mm-hmm. It's kind of like, when you go, those people that spray you with perfume.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They are not employees of the store. They're employees of that whatever that perfume they're spraying on you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
So if they come with their own inventory of, of perfume, mm-hmm. and they switch a $50 perfume for a $500 perfume that's coming out of our inventory, it's kind of like that. So, So once I figured it out, then I started to label the watches and the bands, and then I no longer had the employee do counts.
You did your counts?
No, they counted, but they looked at the description. Mm-hmm. So we would put a label, watch number 250.
Yeah.
And it is, and I would write the description in the log, mm-hmm. and then the price point. So if the watch did not match that description, the employee would say, "Hey, wait a minute, I think you mixed up your watch with our watch."
They'd be like, oh, how did that happen?
Wow, that's weird.
That's crazy.
So come next inventory, I think our shortage went down it went from 150,000 over a course of 6 months to 10,000. Right?
Wow, that's incredible.
And my location wasn't the worst. There were some locations, like the New York location, that had loss of $850,000.
Yeah.
And the space was no bigger than this couch,
those
right?
thieves over there, man.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So when I had asked for a raise, and my boss, and that's one thing that we women are afraid to ask for raises. We shouldn't be afraid. Men are not afraid to ask for raises. Mm-hmm. And why are we afraid to ask for raises? Because we undervalue ourselves, right? So, I there were some high profile cases that, I had concluded in my store for the, year and a half, 2 years that I was there. Mm-hmm. And then I was ready to ask for a raise. So when I asked for a raise, my boss said, no way. There's no way that they're going to give you a raise.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't need you to fight my fight for me. Let me speak to the person who's going to tell me yes or no. Who's going to approve it? I'll build my case, because I feel, I'm training my counterparts.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm making less than they are. Oh, you're not making less than they are. Yes, I am making less than they are. I know. So I when this occurred, when I was able to drop that shortage on those watches, mm-hmm. By a lot, and the CEO and the CFO came to do the walkthrough, and they asked, "How did you reduce the shortage on these watches?" I said, well, I can explain to you in detail, but basically you need to look out for the vendors. Don't let the vendors put their hands on our inventory, because they're switching them out. And he was like, have we made any arrests? And I said, no, because, the employee caught it at the moment. right? Like, hey, this is not our watch. So I trained the employees, made them aware that this could be a possibility, and they were able to address it at the time.
Yeah.
So no theft actually occurred, right? According to the law. It was just a mistake.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah.
So when that occurred, when I had my moment to shine, right, in front of the CEO and the CFO of the company, I looked at my boss and I was like, I better get that raise. So he never let me speak to anybody, but, because I think he was the person that had the authority to decide whether I was going to get a raise or not. But
that's really selfish. It's like the salary is not going to come out of your pocket.
Right.
Like, why not let this young woman, make enough money?
Well, that's the thing, and this is why I feel that I suffered more as a woman than as a lesbian. And fortunately enough, I grew up in a city that's a lot more open, than other cities in the U.S. But what I realized is that at least in the 90s, the men in power had a monopoly over the funds available to pay salaries.
Yeah.
And that they deliberately decided to pay, a higher salary to a man than a woman. It wasn't an accident. Wow. Because every time that it came time for me to hire an employee, I was always, authorized to pay a higher rate for a man with less experience than for a woman who had 6 times more experience than this man. And
the woman will get paid less, and the
right.
man will get paid more.
I would have to fight for a bigger starting salary for that new female employee than I would for a male. And there was a couple of times when my boss was like, "Well, does he have kids?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he has 2 kids." "Oh, give him $2 more. He's going to need it." So not only did I not have to fight for a good wage for my male employees, but
it was encouraged.
It was encouraged. Right. And I'm sure that he had the same mentality towards me. That I didn't need to, and once I confronted him and I said, "Hey, why are you so willing to pay my male employee, authorize a higher pay for my male employees than for my female employees?" And his justification was that men had to take care of their families, and women financially take care of their families. Yeah. And women
most of the time
can just depend
on a job. They do more than. Yeah.
Well, women have husbands who are going to get paid more, so they're okay.
So why do they need?
But what if both of them gets paid more? They don't. Then the family gets even better.
Right. So I encountered that a lot. I encountered a lot of comments like, "What do you know? You're not going to do. You're just a female. You're not going to be able to do that." My male counterparts were always, because it was a male-dominated field. So when I traveled. When we had to go to the company meetings where they would gather us in a certain city, their comments at the beginning, the first couple of years that I was doing this, were demeaning. Like, "Oh yeah, well, you're not gonna," or if I wanted to make a contribution to a conversation, an intellectual contribution, I was always just ignored. And in fact, when they found out I was a lesbian, they took me to nude bars. Like I became part of the. So just to give you a comparison of how I suffered more as a woman than I did as.
Oh, they feel like you're part of the.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, you like women like I do. Oh, you're one of the guys." And then they would invite me to nude bars, and I would become part of their little club, which I respect what men do, when they're hanging out together. It's just not my thing,
Yeah.
HR would have their hands full, all week if people tried that today.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. Because remember, we were in the 90s.
Yeah.
So then you do your job really well, you get the raise, and you start being really, really good at your job. And then you catch someone that you're not supposed to cut.
Yes. Oh, that.
That.
I'm going to have to be tread cautiously here.
Yes, that's okay. As long as we get the message across.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a very, very high-end senior executive that was doing some very naughty things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like 240,000 worth of naughty things, right?
Yeah.
And I knew that for this investigation, I had to dot all my I's, cross my T's.
Yeah.
It had to be like undisputable, right? I couldn't leave any loopholes, nothing open. Mm-hmm. And so it took me about 8 months to conduct this investigation.
Wow.
And I had, other managers' statements, employee statements, collaborating what I had as evidence on videotapes, mm-hmm. and our personal interaction with this individual.
Yeah.
And so I thought I had a really, really tight case. So once I had it, and it was very, I kept it secret from a lot of my employees. That's mm-hmm. how sensitive
it was.
I only had 2 employees working on this. Mm-hmm. And once I felt that I had everything, all the elements that I needed to not just speak to this high-end senior executive, but also send this person to jail, prosecute this person, right? Mm-hmm. I went to my boss and I explained to him the situation, and he didn't say much. He said, "I'll get back to you." And I thought that was odd, because usually the conversation would be like, "Wow, that much money?"
Yeah.
Like there was no surprise, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, "That's odd." So, 2 weeks go by and I don't hear anything from my boss. So I call him and I say, "Hey, what's going on with the investigation?" "Oh, I forwarded it to corporate. They haven't gotten back to me. I'll let you know." And time goes by and I call corporate, mm-hmm. and I speak to corporate, and, I get stonewalled everywhere I go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't stop, right? Because I'm starting to get upset. Because, I just terminated an employee a month ago for stealing their perfume, mm-hmm. but we can't address this problem, this $240,000 problem, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm persistent. And my boss realizes she's not going to stop.
Yeah, she's not going to let this go.
Right. So they send him to have a conversation with me. And I remember he called me and he said, "Hey, will you be working tomorrow?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, great. I'm going to come to your store. So be there at 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. Or 5. No, it was 5 a.m. Yeah. Now, we wouldn't open the store for the employees, the receiving department, until 6 a.m. So I thought, he probably wants to talk about the case, and he doesn't want anybody else to be in the building.
Right.
So I show
top
up,
secret stuff.
Right, top secret stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I show up at the at my job the next day, all enthusiastic, thinking that this is going to finally happen. We're going to talk about this case. And the executive offices were up in the 4th floor and in the top floor, and where his office was located. I mean, the regional offices.
Yeah.
And he says, "Let's go to my office." So we go into we step into the elevator, and he stops the elevator, he stops it halfway, between 2 floors.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the? I mean, if I hadn't known him for so many years, I would have thought this guy's
He's gonna kill me.
He's gonna kill me, rape me.
Yeah, something.
Oh God,
but
yeah.
That didn't cross my mind. I just thought, why is he stopping? And he says, but it was because he knew there was no cameras in the elevator. And there was no audio, and for me to install a covert one in the elevator was going to be very difficult. Mm-hmm. So I managed what systems, like the overt camera system was fixed. Like mm-hmm. It was designed that way. Everybody knew they were there, right? Yeah. But the covert cameras, I moved around as I pleased, as I saw fit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it could have, so he was aware that I could have a covert camera in a location where he chose to have a conversation with me. So that's why he took me into the elevator.
Yeah.
And he says to me, Loida, everybody's really happy with the job that you have done with us. You've done a great job. You're going to get promoted. We're going to give you a regional trainer position. I just need you to sweep this case under the carpet. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? I mean, I literally felt like a ton of bricks fell on me. Mm-hmm. And he says, so I was in shock, and he says, you have to sweep this under the carpet. He's like, you're part of the club, Loida, you're in. I just need you to do this. You're going to move ahead in the company because you're part of this club now. Yeah. And I don't know if club was the word he used, but that's what he meant, mm-hmm. right? I just remember him meaning that I was part of this secret group, right?
This organization.
This organization inside of this organization. So we walk in. I mean, I'm in complete shock. I don't think I said a word. We get to his office, and the only thing that I can muster up to say was, I need to go downstairs to my office and think about it. I'll have an answer for you as soon as I come up with one.
Smart, yeah.
And because I needed to remove myself from that situation. I mean, I was in shock. I needed to think. Regroup myself, right?
Yeah.
So why was this so impactful to me? At that moment, I realized that I probably wasn't promoted because I worked hard. Even though I earned it. Yeah. I was probably promoted because it was a chess move for the company. Mm-hmm. Right?
Wow.
And I also the idea of the American dream started to like collapse right in front of my eyes, like that belief. Mm-hmm. Because I started to remember conversations in the senior executive meetings about employees, lower level employees. Mm-hmm. And I started remembering how we would have conversations about, Maria from the shoe department. She's been working for the company X years, and, mm-hmm. And she's the top seller, and there's a manager position coming up in the shoe department. She would give it to Maria. She's qualified. Yeah. And then somebody would always say, well, I think, Jane has the face to represent the company. And I never gave it much thought at that time. Mm-hmm. But when my boss had that conversation, it was talking about a club and mm-hmm. and I'm in and this and that, it dawned on me,
give it a lot more context.
Right.
About where that comes from.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's why it was so impactful. I mean, I was devastated. I was like, I felt like I was devastated because everything that I had believed in up until that point was in question, or not everything, but a lot of things, like the American dream, the fact, the fact that my parents would always tell me, just if you work hard, you're going to move up, you're going to do well in life. Yeah, that fell apart, and so I went back down to my office, and I sat there and I thought to myself, what just happened? Yeah. And once I was able to get past that, I thought, okay, but seriously, I can get promoted. I can make a lot more money. But how am I going to feel about myself? Yeah. Knowing every day that I come to work, knowing that I put employees in jail for stealing a perfume, but this person gets a free pass because they're part of the quote unquote club. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And of course she was Caucasian. So, and every cell in my body told me, no, I can't do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If I did it, I would be miserable. Yeah. I would be miserable. I would hate myself, and I went back up to my boss's office. Yeah. And by that time, there was already people in the other office, the adjacent offices. So I couldn't be as frank and open. So I told him, okay, so I said, look, I can't meet your expectations. So I'm just going to resign. Yeah. And I'm going to give you 1 month notice because we're in the middle of renovating the camera system, the security system. And only I knew what was the deal, right? It's complicated with the wiring. And I said, but I'm going to request the severance package. And we won't go into details on that, but but I basically said, look, by that time I was the highest paid person in my position because I had asked for many raises along the way. Again, I wasn't afraid, and that's what I mean. Women need they need to fight. They need to value themselves and not be afraid to say, hey, I deserve this raise, or I deserve this promotion, or, you know, I'm really well, I feel like I'm really fit for this new management position that just came up, or whatever, and make their case. And this is why. Don't just go ask for it. Don't say I deserve it. This is why I think I deserve it.
Right.
And that's what I did on several occasions during the, you know, decade and a half that I was with that company. So by that time I was getting paid, you know, really well. And so I said, look, you know, the person that's going to fill my shoes is not going to get paid as much as I am. So I'm going to request this severance package. And why did I do that? I could have taken a different route. I could have called the authorities because there was some, you know, I don't want to give away too much about the case, too much detail, but there were certain things that violated laws. It wasn't just, you know, theft. No. It was the fact that they were covering it up and So you know, why didn't I take that route? Because I would have been in a fight with the extremely powerful company that, and because I know they represented me in court many times. I know how they would tear people apart. And so what was I going to gain from doing that? Nothing. Things were not going to change. No. But that experience...
We're not going to be part of that.
Right. Yeah. So I chose, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to choose a career that I enjoy. That a career where I feel making a contribution to my society or the world or whatever. I didn't know what I was going to do at that time. But I was tired. But at that moment, I realized I'm just recovering money for greedy, you know, wealthy people. I'm not making, my job makes a good contribution to these business people, but not to the society that I live in. If anything, I'm participating in the systematic prejudice and racism that exists in this country. And I'm not going to be a part of that, you know? So, you know, that's when I left.
And that's a tough decision after, how many years exactly you said?
I was in the industry 17 years.
17 years. That's a tough decision to make.
It is, because I thought I knew myself. But when I left that career, it had become so much my personality. I didn't know who I was for the next year or two.